UFOs have been spotted since the beginning of time, and although they are simply crafts that are unidentified, they have always had an association with aliens visiting from outer space. But spotting something in the sky and claiming it to be of extraterrestrial origin is one thing. Actually having a fatality or a disappearance linked to the sighting or pursuit of a UFO, and you take things onto a whole nother path. Now these stories may seem hard to believe, but we can say with almost certainty, these people unfortunately passed away or are currently missing, and the links between them and supposed aliens or UFOs is startling. As always, sit back and enjoy. Carl Hunrath and Wilbur Wilkinson. On November the 11th, 1953, just 2 weeks before the infamous Kinross incident took place, Carl Hunrath and Wilbur J. Wilkinson hired a small plane from Gardena Airport in Los Angeles. They submitted no flight plan, and the plane was piloted by the inexperienced Hunrath, who the previous day had told friends that he believed a UFO had landed nearby, and that some people had left Earth and travelled to other planets. He then told his confused friends not to be alarmed if the same thing happened to him, as he was going to find the site. Hunrath had long claimed that he was in contact by radio with an extraterrestrial race known as the Masurians, and was determined to seek out a way of getting to their homeworld. However, this trip was to be the last time either of the men were ever seen again, as they disappeared seemingly off the face of the Earth, and left behind a trail of unanswered questions, leaving us wondering, did they find what they were looking for? Shortly after they disappeared, Wilkinson's wife gave an interview, and explained that her husband and Hunrath firmly believed the end of the world was near, and that the Masurians were plotting to invade Earth. She revealed the pair were obsessed with UFOs, and she showed them a den where her husband had a collection of unidentified craft pictures, and bizarre pictographs that he believed were written in an interplanetary language. She also said that the family had only recently moved back to California after her husband's old friend Hunrath told them he knew where a flying saucer was. But Hunrath wasn't just an amateur in this field. He had links to the controversial UFOologist George Adamski, who claimed to have photographed spaceships from other planets and had met with aliens. Although Hunrath had fallen out with Adamski after he had invented Bosco, a device intended to bring down flying saucers. To this day, not a trace of Hunrath, Wilkinson, or their plane has ever been found, and the only rational explanation for their fate is that Hunrath's inexperience as a pilot caused the plane to crash somewhere in the mountains. But since not a shred of evidence has been found, the pair's obsession with aliens, the fact they were actually out looking for a UFO, and that Felix Moncler disappeared under incredibly mysterious circumstances while pursuing a UFO just 2 weeks later, and you cannot argue the fact that this is a very strange case that I wish we knew more about. Todd sees. At around 5 AM on the 4th of August 2002, 39-year-old Todd Sees left his Pennsylvania home to go deer spotting on the Mantor Ridge mountain range, just behind his home in Point Township, telling his wife he will be back by midday. But when he failed to return, his wife became concerned and called the police. Shortly after, his son found his dad's abandoned four-wheeler, and the discovery prompted a large-scale search of the area involving police, locals and sniffer dogs. Divers were also called in to search a nearby pond, but there was no trace of him. The search continued the next day, and around 8 PM that evening, a patch of white was spotted in the woods near the pond. The area was very close to dense woodland, and firemen were called in to cut a path through the thick bramble, where they discovered the body of Sees, supposedly 70 foot up a tree. He was found only in his boxers and had a look of terror on his face, but strangely, no family member was asked to identify the body, and his body was removed without a coroner being present. An immediate autopsy was carried out, but the results were inconclusive, stating only that he had no internal or external injuries. According to the story, Todd was then returned to the family in a sealed casket, with a strong recommendation they do not open it, and he was buried without his family ever viewing his body. If that sounds strange, then a few months later the toxicology report suggested cocaine toxicity, and the case was closed. As you can imagine, questions have been raised, and there appears to have been some sort of cover-up, with claims that the FBI were involved. For starters, Todd's body was found in an area on his own property that had been intensively searched the day before they found him, suggesting that he had been somewhere else and his body was put there after his death, Also, the physical condition of his body was apparently more consistent with a death that had occurred days or weeks previously, rather than just a few hours, as was the case. It later came out that on the morning Todd left his home, at least 3 local people reported seeing a disc-shaped UFO over Mantor Ridge. This, along with numerous accounts of the FBI being first on the scene, as well as the lack of press coverage, leads many to point to a cover-up. But if so, then why Todd was targeted is not known. Sadly for his family and friends though, there are many unanswered questions, and it's been suggested Mr. C's was the victim of an incredibly unexplained and extraordinary death, with possible links to aliens or otherworldly forces. What's your thoughts? João Prestes Filho. On March 4th, 1946, Brazilian fishermen João Prestes Filho and Salvador dos Santos were returning home from a day's fishing in the Chieti River. After the day was up, Filho dropped Santos off and headed home in his horse-drawn carriage through the unlit area towards the village of Arikari Guma. When he reached home, he had the place to himself, as it was carnival season, and most of the residents, including his wife and 5 children, were out enjoying the celebrations, and in their haste had accidentally left Filho locked out. However, he managed to climb through an open window, and as soon as he got inside the house, he got the feeling something was watching him. As he glanced out of the window, he was struck by a beam of red-hot light radiating from a glowing object in the sky. Filho immediately covered his face with his hands to protect himself and fell to his knees, as he felt his body burning. In a panic, he was able to open the door and run out into the street, desperately looking for help. He ran in agony to his sister's house and slumped on a bed. The police were called, and Filho was able to recall what happened. He also said that there was no one to blame for what had happened because his attacker had not been of this world. It quickly became apparent that Filho was severely burnt. His flesh looked like it had been boiled. In a desperate attempt to save the stricken man, he was taken to hospital, but doctors were baffled as to what could have caused such catastrophic injuries, and there was nothing they could do. Filho then began to deteriorate rapidly. He appeared to be decomposing while still alive, with chunks of flesh falling off his body, exposing his bones. However, bizarrely, his clothes and hair remained undamaged. Despite this, he did not feel any pain, and was talking until the last moments of his life, even asking for a glass of water. Filho finally died at around 10 PM that day. Filho's death is one of the most ghastly mysteries of the 20th century. And what exactly he had seen in the sky that night that caused him to literally melt is what many UFO experts call the clearest cut case of an extraterrestrial attack in history. What's your thoughts? Captain Thomas Mantell. On January 7th, 1948, operations in the control tower at Godman Army Airfield spotted an unusual object in the skies above Madisonville, Kentucky. They soon received reports from the Kentucky Highway Patrol that similar sightings of a circular object around 250 to 300 feet in diameter was heading west. Several officers were called to investigate, but were unable to identify what this thing was. At the same time, 4 F-51D Mustang aircraft were already in the air on a routine training exercise led by Flight Commander Captain Thomas Mantell, and they were ordered to go and pursue the object. Mantell acknowledged the request, and the 4 aircraft started their search. Shortly after, one of the planes was running low on fuel and requested a return to base. This was followed by another request from one of the other 3 remaining pilots also to break away, as he was becoming disorientated and feared he was losing his bearings. It was also asked that one of the 2 remaining pilots also break away and accompany the lost pilot safely back. This left Captain Mantell in sole pursuit of this craft. Mantell climbed to 15,000 feet and reported to the control tower that he had the object within sight and was climbing higher to investigate. Shortly after, he said that he was closing in on the object, but sadly this would be his last message, as at 25,000 feet, alone and with no oxygen, Mantell purportedly blacked out. His aircraft crashed around 90 miles south of Godman Airfield, and firefighters later pulled his body from the wreckage. The UFO disappeared from sight at around 3:50 PM, and up until this point, many continued to observe it. At the time, the incident received an enormous amount of media attention, and various rumours about the incident began to spread, with claims that a flying saucer shot down Mantell's plane. It was also alleged that his body was ridden with bullets and the wreckage was radioactive, and according to various internet reports, he told ground crew he could see people inside the craft, although there doesn't seem to be hard evidence to substantiate any of these claims. The official report states that Captain Mantell was flying too high, lost consciousness due to a lack of oxygen, causing his plane to spiral out of control at high speed before crashing. But there was never an explanation for what the UFO was. Some suggestions, like weather balloons or missiles, just don't hold up. What is telling is that a marker in honour of Captain Mantell actually states he died in pursuit of a UFO, so there is no question about it that he was pursuing something. But what exactly this was, or if it was of alien origin, is unknown and pretty terrifying. Bruno Borges. Now, this story was brought to my attention by a viewer of the channel, and it's a very new case. On March the 27th, 2017, 25-year-old psychology student Bruno Borges had dinner with his family in the Brazilian city of Rio Branco, just before his parents went away travelling. But when they returned a month later, Borges was nowhere to be found. A search of his previously locked-away bedroom revealed he had removed all of the furniture, and the room was lined with thousands of words and strange diagrams, along with hundreds of books and notepads full of strange writings. But perhaps the most bizarre thing in the room was a statue of Italian philosopher Giordano Bruno, whose claims about the universe that the sun, not the earth, was at the centre of the solar system, along with other controversial beliefs, led to him being charged with heresy and burned at the stake in 1600. Shortly after the disappearance, a video of Bruno's room was posted online, and many noted that he had an uncanny resemblance to Giordano, and that there were many outlandish theories about what it all meant. This led to speculation that Bruno had been abducted by aliens, as there was a self-portrait of Borges standing with an alien, and unusual signs associated with Satanism and the Illuminati on the bedroom floor. His family confirmed that he had been working on a secretive project since 2013, and had constantly been asking for funding to complete it, although the only detail he would give to relatives was that he was writing a series of books that would change humanity in a good way. They admitted that Bruno had a keen interest in extraterrestrial life, and they are convinced his project had something to do with his disappearance. Not a whole lot is known about this as of yet, but is it possible he stumbled upon something that proved the existence of aliens? If anyone can shed any light on what might have happened to Bruno, and the strange circumstances surrounding him, then his family would be very grateful. For now, investigators say the case remains confidential, but all possibilities are being considered.